So, welcome everybody. Today we're talking about leadership lessons learned from Adam Grant. I know I'm a big fan. Obviously, these two guys are. So, real some quick housekeeping for everybody. Stick around to the end. You can enter in to win something for free. Please ask your questions in the chat. Alexis will be monitoring those. Anything we talk about today, our hyperlinks will be added immediately after the live portion because the comments don't work with us very well otherwise. And now, Alan, talk to us about why you like this topic.
I don't know when I first learned about Adam Grant, but I've just been a fan of his teachings and his leadership in the space of careers, of social psychology. He talks with a lot. First off, Adam Grant is a social psychologist from University of Pennsylvania. You probably he has over 5 million followers on LinkedIn. He talks a lot about careers, about leadership, about management, about social organizations more than that. And he talks at a lot of very well-known companies that I've been part of. He spoke at Salesforce to the leadership there. And he's spoken at Google events as well. And he's worked with Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook. So he's been omnipresent in my career in terms of an inspirational leader. So I've read a bunch of his books, Give and Take, Think Again. Actually, that one I haven't read yet, but it's on my list. Hidden Potential and other books. And when I was forming academic careers, I actually reached out to Adam to ask him if he would give me feedback on my business plan. And he actually did. I actually have a copy of our first academic careers business plan where Adam gave some feedback in there. So anyway, I'm a big fan of Adam. Yeah, actually, Katie, if you scroll down, if you can show the comments, I don't know if you can see the comments on your, there it is, AG. Can you share more about why I'm so passionate about diversity? And then the rest of it, the comment is hidden. That was back in August of 2020, but I've been a fan of his before. And then, coincidentally, I met Andrew Stern, my co-guest here. I forget if you reached out to me or I reached out to you. And I saw that we had the mutual connection of Adam Grant. And I think you had something in your LinkedIn title or something that indicated that you're a big Adam Grant fan. So we started geeking out on Adam Grant. And that is how we got here today, where Andrew and I are going to be talking about some leadership lessons that have learned and definitely inspired me. And I know Andrew has a different interaction and way of knowing Adam.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today, Alan and team. It's great to be with all of you. Adam, I was fortunate to first meet Adam in May of 2010, near the end of my time at Wharton as a student. And this is prior to him writing Give and Take and even teaching at the undergraduate level. I was fortunate at that time, prior to the fame that you alluded to, Alan, walk into his office, have an initial interaction. I have a vivid memory of him rifling through his mail as we were speaking for the first time. And as it turned out, we actually grew up not that far away from one another in suburban Detroit. And lo and behold, we had many folks that we came to know and interests that we shared. And though I never had Adam as a professor, I have been fortunate to learn from him over the past 14 years in innumerable ways. So I'm grateful to share some of those takeaways with your audience today.
That seems like an excellent transition into our first topic. Andrew talked to us about when multiple people believe in you, it's probably time to believe them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, gang, this particular quote, it comes from Adam's most recent book, Hidden Potential. Hopefully, all of you have purchased a copy. This is Adam's take on the concept of imposter syndrome that obviously many of us at different points have navigated in our careers. Adam is of the belief, and I so appreciate this sort of contrarian point of view, that imposter syndrome is actually indicative of one's hidden potential. That if we have those kinds of concerns, nervousness, those kinds of anxieties, that it's actually maybe a testament to some underlying potential that we may not be seeing in ourselves. The quote from the book that I would add to supplement this one, I'm looking down just to make sure I get it right. Are others overestimating you, or are you underestimating yourself? And this is the great pushback. We know from the research that from a gender perspective, Women will oftentimes only apply to jobs if they meet 100% of the stated criteria. Men, that threshold is 60% as a point of comparison. And so the actionable takeaway I would just offer for this group and the sort of Kadima Careers audience more broadly is moving from a state of hesitate or a state of timidity to a state of candidacy and apply and throw your hat in the ring. So there's the first takeaway I would toss out. Alan, how does all this sit with you?
100% agree. I see people opting out of opportunities all the time. And I do think anecdotally, I see it more in women. I'm familiar with that research as well. I'm not on top of the numbers. Kudos to you to knowing those numbers. But I do know it. And I've seen it anecdotally with my wife with some things versus me with some things. Like, I don't mind like applying for things that I have no business being in consideration for. The worst that happens is I don't hear back. It's actually better to get rejected. It's almost worse to be in limbo and not to hear back. But I've just been calloused by so much rejection in my life. I've submitted so many applications, I've taken so many swings at the plate that now I just don't opt out. But this saying of when multiple people believe in you, it's probably time to believe in them. This has hindered me in my career in terms of like imposter syndrome setting in. And I can think about like my time when I joined Google, where I thought that I was in over my head working with a bunch of type A people that I could not compete with. And I thought I was doing a horrendous job. I actually asked my manager to demote me from a level 6 to a level 5. Fortunately, he thought I was joking, but all the evidence was positive. But what I was telling myself was negative, that I couldn't do this. And imposter syndrome set in, and several psychologists, psychiatrists, and drugs later and time, I was able to address it. But yeah, it's important to get that 360-degree feedback. And I highly recommend people getting different perspectives on how you are performing and where you think where you excel, where your weaknesses are on both sides of the equation.
Tremendous.
Yes. And there isn't a good transition to this next one from there, but let's talk about the power of loose connections.
So this is something that it's probably a term or a concept that's been around forever, but I remember first learning about this from an article that Adam Grant wrote. I think he did one article in New York Times and one in Inc. about the power of loose connections or loose ties. And the concept behind this is that when you seek help from others, when you're asking for support, you likely will go to your inner circle of really tight ties, your friends and family and so forth. But they've probably already given you all that insight and opportunity and introductions, especially as it goes into the job search or any sort of advice. So by extending your circle outward from like your tight circle to those loose connections that you have, to reach out to them again, people that you haven't spoken to since high school or college or a past job, and rekindling those loose connections, it leads to so much more new, like novelty of opportunity that can lead to potentially a referral into a company, a lead for a business, just new perspective. So Adam talks about the power of loose connections and loose ties, and likely where you get your next job is not going to be from your inner tight circle, because if your inner tight circle already had those jobs available, they would have already told you about it. But it will be about rekindling and engaging and nurturing those relationships of those loose ties. And the bigger that network of loose ties are, and the looser that they get, the more opportunities that will be presented to you. So leverage those loose ties, reconnect with people, and the data shows that it's more effective to get you opportunities, to get you job referrals, and to present new ideas to you.
Tremendous. This is a takeaway, Alan. Like, this idea aligns with the title of one of Adam's more recent books called Think Again. We might assume organically, hey, let me reach out to that inner circle that knows me super well. And yet what you're suggesting from the research, from Adam's writing, is in fact those relatively more distant, those relatively more dormant ties, relationships, connections may actually be more productive or fruitful because of the novelty that you alluded to. So let's marry that title, Think Again, with the research you're alluding to. Let's reach wide when we're trying to explore the next opportunity, as opposed to just the top, let's say 25 or so folks that we are thinking of at first blush who could help us find the next opportunity. Nice.
Yeah. And I know that, Alan, you've talked about like sending an email to like your entire network, whether people they knew very well or not. And I should have said from the beginning, we're totally putting this in the context of career acceleration and job acquisition. But yeah, I find that people that don't know you as well are often like, I know you a little bit, I have a great impression of you, and I would love to make this connection. Sometimes when you know people better, it's not always as obvious. Anyway, so now I'm excited for the story you're going to tell with this one, Andrew, for the surprising power of powerless communication.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, gang, this particular lesson comes from Adam's book called Originals. Beautiful cover. This book was Adam's step into creativity and exploring some of the roots of exceptionally creative companies, leaders, teams, and the like. And one of the stories, the one that Katie, I think you're alluding to here, there is a particular entrepreneur. Some of you may have heard of him by the name of Rufus Griscom. And at the time, one of the stories that Adam highlights in the book is how Rufus was pursuing venture capital for his business. And there was actually a slide in his presentation, in his pitch book, if you will, in his pitch materials. Here's why you should not invest in this business. Okay. I don't know if any of you could imagine including such a slide in today's economy, but this is something that Rufus and I believe his business partner, the two of them did when they were pursuing venture capital, when they were looking for more funding. Here are 10 reasons not to invest. And you might say to yourself, okay, like maybe that's bold, that's ambitious. Maybe it worked for them one time. I doubt it would work for them a second time. It actually was successful, and they took it the next step, which is to say, hey, when this business, which came to be Babbel, when Babbel grew and they wanted to sell it, when they were pitching this business to Disney, here are 10 reasons, Disney, you should not buy our business. I don't know how many of us go into these kinds of conversations with a sort of power dynamic that is so stilted in that way, whether it's an interview or a group interview or some kind of a recruiting scenario, a networking event where there is this sort of power imbalance. But no doubt it exists when you're pitching for venture capital or when you're trying to sell your business to an admirable company like Disney. And what Adam is asserting in including this example, and he even has a TEDx salon talk that he gave about 11 years ago. You can look it up on YouTube with this particular title. He's saying, hey, there is a tremendous amount of value in including disarming communication in your interactions with other people. So instead of just talking about the strengths of yourself as a candidate or your business in this particular instance, let's talk about our shortcomings as a candidate. Let's be real with a recruiter or an interviewer. Instead of exclusively speaking in an assertive, super confident way, let's be a little bit more tentative at times. Let's use some language that may communicate a level of uncertainty, which also humanizes us. And then the third contention that is included in this TEDx talk is instead of exclusively giving answers, we could assume that would be from a place of demonstrating confidence and competence. Let's be open to asking some questions. Let's be curious in our interactions with other people. Let's turn these sort of interrogation into a dialogue. So all this to say, Adam, both in the book Originals, as well as in this TEDx talk from about 11 years ago, he encourages us to shift from just speaking in an assertive way to a way that maybe is a bit more tentative, a bit more less confident. And the research suggests you just might get a little farther.
Would you consider like self-deprecating humor to be part of that as well? Or
listen, Adam, in this TEDx talk, Alan, he actually speaks about a situation where he was recruited to deliver some kind of a workshop, maybe a training experience to, I believe, some Air Force leaders. And they had the kinds of nicknames that you imagine from the movie Top Gun. Gunner and Striker and Sand Dune. And these folks, you will never know their real name. It's classified. And Adam at the time was about 25 years old. And of course, these folks have decades more professional experience than he do in likely much more stressful environments than he had experienced. And to this notion of self-deprecation, he opened the second of these workshops that he offered based on the poorer feedback he received after the first one with, I know what you're all thinking. How can I possibly learn from a 12-year-old? What am I going to learn from a 12-year-old today during today's workshop? And after a bit of silence, he recounts how one of these Air Force leaders, maybe it was Sand Dune for all we know, said, you got to be at least 13. So he went right for the jugular. Let's just call out the elephant in the room. You all are wildly more experienced, competent, tenured. You've navigated so many more stressful environments. All of that is true. And I would love to share with you some research that could help you elevate your performance today. So it's a both and to humanize, increase relatability, approachability, and to break down any perceived barrier between the audience and the presenter in that case. And perhaps for this audience, the idea is between recruiter or hiring manager and you as a candidate. How can we connect a little bit more deeply in these 30 minutes that we have on Zoom to get to know each other and assess one another?
Yeah, and that's so critical because you're really just trying to influence the outcome of this semi-arbitrary conversation between 30 and 60 minutes. So this is gold in terms of helping to influence that communication and turn a disinclined to an inclined.
Yep. There you have it.
And just stand out amongst a sea of people that are giving very similar answers. Alan, givers and takers.
Yeah. So this, I think, was the first Adam Grant book that I read, Give and Take. I think this was the first one, but it talks about how there are givers and takers out there, and then there's transactors too. I forget the exact term that he used for that. Was it traders or transactors?
Almost. It was matcher. Yep.
Matcher. So I am not great on my Adam Grant trivia. Ask me Seinfeld trivia, and I'll blow you out of the water with that. But the thing that I took from the book was that there are different people out there, and a lot of research shows that givers actually turn out much more successful and happy. And if you don't choose to give, you're probably impacting your outcome as well. Like I've always considered myself to be a giver in a lot of situations. Sometimes I'm selfish. If you're asking to share my chocolate dessert, I'm not too generous with that. But if someone's looking to get some advice from me or to get some guidance on something, and it's easy for me to provide that, and there's an abundance of it, not like my chocolate cake, which I got a small sliver of, but if there's an abundance of it, I am more than generous and willing to provide. And the research in this book showed there are some ways that people can abuse these things. So if they are continuous to be like takers and not, there are ways that this can work against you, but just understanding that there's givers and takers out there. And the way that we generally apply this with academic careers and our clients is to assume that out there in the world, there are givers, takers, matchers. There are a lot of givers out there, and you can't always identify who's a giver and who's not a giver. There's no badge on their LinkedIn profile to say that they're a giver or a taker. But if you reach out to enough people, you will find that there is a pretty good distribution of givers in all walks of life, whether it's senior leadership, junior leadership, different countries, or whatever. You will find givers all across the board. So if you reach out to enough people and you ask for some help and advice in a kind, humble way, you will find lots of people that will give back. And as we also teach folks when they're having these conversations, don't just go into that conversation with seeking to take, but also understand on how you can give back as well. There's always a way to give back that conversation. So I just found that to be a very inspirational book to think about. There's different people in the world, and you can also change. Just because you are a taker now does not mean that you are always a taker. You can change your mindset, you can change your actions, and you can go into that giver bucket, which the research shows you will be happier and more successful. With that, I'm going to give some time to Andrew here to take us down his perspective.
Yeah, the thing I would just add, Alan, you're right to call out, this was Adam's first book. It was the New York Times bestseller that really launched him into the stratosphere as a as a professor and thought leader, consultant, speaker, and all that he does. One of the things that some folks may be less aware of that I wanted to call out connected to this particular takeaway is the concept of generosity burnout. So if we overextend ourselves as givers, if we are not intentional, methodical, managed, planful in the giving that we do, there's actually a risk that the giver burns out and does not accomplish their core mission. So there, if you think about a distribution of givers, no doubt, as you're alluding to, there are high performers, exceptionally high performers that would be classified as or characterized as givers. There are also individuals that could be characterized as very low performers who give a tremendous amount, but it actually gets in the way of their ability to achieve their core mission, their core job. So I believe there was an HBR article connected to this concept of generosity burnout written by Adam and one of his research assistants at the time, Reb Rebele. That would be something I'd encourage the audience to check out if you're wanting to learn more about, okay, yeah, I subscribe to the idea. I want to be a giver. That's how I want folks to label me. But I also want to be intentional about how I give in a way that de-risks the possibility that I may burn out from operating in this way. So how can I put those guardrails in place? That would be the article that some folks may derive value from. Check it out, gang.
Yes, and I just threw his TED talk about giving and taking in the chat. It's one of my favorites ever. And so we're running a little short on time, but I also am excited about this one. Don't make the right decision. Make the decision we think.
Yeah, this one, Katie, this was from a graduation speech that Adam delivered in 2011 at the University of Pennsylvania, as you were alluding to, Alan, where Adam is a tenured professor, the earliest to ever earn tenure, I believe, at Wharton. And he was speaking, of course, to the Wharton undergraduate population, many of whom will pursue admirable career journeys within different dimensions of business. And he was calling out this concept of a maximizer. He was trying to paint a picture for the audience of what it means to be a maximizer. If you're listening to the radio, let's say, and you hear a great song, are you the person who still checks the other stations to see if there is a better song out there? Or do you just stick to that radio station and enjoy the great song that you have landed on or that has been fed up to you? And what he was suggesting to the audience, and perhaps it's relevant for this group too, is the dream job. A, it may not exist. And B, it may not always be desirable at a particular point in time in one's life or within reach at a particular point in one's life. And so we may find ourselves as we're pursuing our careers, we may be getting the second best or the third best opportunity as we're going about our professional travels. And Adam's contention is maybe that isn't so bad. And if we are wise in looking at all that second, third, or fourth choice actually is, if we can think creatively about how do I get the most out of this experience? How do I make the decision to join this company, step into that second, third, or fourth choice? How do I make that decision right? How do I make it the best that it can be, as opposed to starting from a place of dissatisfaction, frustration, upset, anger, whatever? Instead, let's switch from being never satisfied to being content, perhaps even thrilled with good enough and seeing it for all that it can be. So this was another item, no book that I'm referencing here, but definitely check out that 2011 graduation speech. It's only about 5 minutes. And gosh, on some level, it makes me wish I graduated in 2011 instead of 2010 to be able to hear it live.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of that, and I've heard the term like optimizing versus satisficing, and I'm a big satisficer generally in life. I don't tell that to my wife. I was looking for the best wife ever, but all the 29 of my jobs, I was always looking for something better.
Yeah, yeah. And perhaps it's okay to be satisfied with the opportunity in front of us and to find ways to creatively enhance it, make the most of it. Whether that means, oh, we're going to stand up a side hustle. Oh, we're going to join additional involvements within the company. Oh, it's going to support our familial commitments or our childcare commitments or other pursuits, interests that we might have in the community, volunteering, whatever. To just acknowledge that sometimes the dream, A, it may not exist, B, it may be out of touch, and C, it actually may be undesirable. walk ourselves back down to earth. There's a final third takeaway from my corner, gang.
Yes. And what is it you always say, Alan? There's no dream job. There's always a better job.
Yes, no dream job, no perfect job, no dream company either. I've worked at lots of companies which were rated the best company to work for at the time. And I got fired from those companies too.
It is now time for takeaways. We're so excited for these different transitions. Okay, so please tell us, Andrew, you first, your number one. If people remember nothing else from today, what would you like them to remember?
Yeah, the phrase I suppose I'd encourage folks to put on a t-shirt or a bumper sticker, this idea of never stop growing. I think in my work as an executive coach, working with the next generation of exceptional organizational leaders at some really admirable companies, I just always am working with individuals to find the next growth frontier, to find the next edge, to be pursuing the next creative possibility, as opposed to being in a period of stagnant or exclusively stable or unchanging. The real development happens when we are pushing ourselves and we are growing. And so, any opportunity within our careers to move in that direction, that's the takeaway. Never stop growing.
Awesome. You don't grow your dead. Go on. I heard
Alan?
Lauren say that once. Go on, Alan. Okay.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I heard Lauren Hill say in a live performance once, if you're not growing, you're dead. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
stuck with me. Anyway,
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah, like a couple of things from today is be a giver. Like life's too short there. Appreciate what has been given to us and those opportunities and give back a little. And yeah. And also I am blown away with Andrew's knowledge of Adam Grant. So I thought we were going to get in debate who was a bigger fan. I'm not even in that contest. But you get a lot more facts about him. So kudos to you. I think we do have some Q&A.
We do, real quick, before the Q&A is coming. Please give us your questions. FYI, we are not doing another one of these Always Be Lookings until the end of June, but we are having a Kadima event on the 12th. Why is it taking you so long to get interviews and how to speed it up? You can use this QR code. The hyperlink will be put into the chat after the live portion is done. And also, please give us your feedback, your honest feedback. It's a gift, right? Follow Kadima on LinkedIn and we will reach out to you via LinkedIn for the person that wins. It is not about being the nicest to us. It's a raffle. And we will opt you into one of our courses that are $79 or $100 value, your choice. So please
give us feedback as a gift. And one of you will win a great prize. The rest of you will earn our thank you.
Our appreciation. All right. And with that, it's time for the Q&A. And I do have an opportunity to, while I find that one first, I will say one of Adam Grant's books is Think Again. And I would love to know from both of you, when have you thought again about your career?
You can go first, Andrew.
Sure. So I alluded to this a couple minutes ago. I'm fortunate to work as an executive coach. Generally speaking, that profession is pursued by individuals in their 50s, 60s, 70s, after decades of admirable experiences professionally. And my sort of think again moment most recently was, why not now? Why not in our 30s? Why not work with the contemporary, modern, next generation leaders and meet them at that juncture in my own journey? And that level of connection and affinity and resonance has been transformative for my business. Why not now? Why delay? Why wait 20 or 30 more years? So that's just one example I would offer of my own rethinking. Alan, what's top of mind for you?
Yeah, I've rethought my career 7 times now. I'll just talk from the recency effect. The most recent time rethinking my career is I always thought I wanted to be part of a corporation. The stability of compensation, the 401k, getting all the cool swag, and that was great. But after getting terminated multiple times and also getting frustrated by the same thing over and over again, it caused me to rethink what I was doing. And rather than get another job where it was just going to lead to another termination, I figured, why not start a company where I can still get fired by clients, but there's a hell of a lot more clients of them. And I'm hopefully never going to get fired by clients, but sometimes we do. But yeah, so I just rethought a path that is a lot less stable, but a lot more upside personally, professionally, emotionally. And I've met great people like Katie and the rest of the Kadima team because of that.
Yes. And guess what we get to do? This.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Dominic. All right, here's our question. With the current tough job market where employers really get their pick on choosing the exact experience in a candidate they want, do you still feel like the advice applies to show your weaknesses? I think in this market, it will just get
Kind of
dismissed faster. You will just get dismissed faster.
Alan, what's your take on this one?
Yeah. So you don't want to like hammer on your weakness. You definitely need to lead with your strengths. But if you do not allude to some foibles that you have or some weaknesses, whether it's brought up or not, you will come across as too cocky. So you have to balance it, but you do need to lead with your strength because generally with the interview, you're marketing and selling yourself. So when Adam talks about that sort of language, it's not the majority of the language, but there's some undercurrent there and weaving it in. Then Andrew, I'll pass it back to you for
Yeah.
preparation.
The only thing I would add to what Alan shared, I think it's great to call out these weaknesses, development areas, opportunities for continued growth. Cool. That's part one. Part two is, so what are you doing to try and get better at them? What steps are you
Yes.
taking? How are you trying to improve and invest and cultivate and build yourself to meet those acknowledged challenges? As Alan was suggesting, are you soliciting 360 feedback with greater frequency to make sure that your behavioral changes are sticking? Are you pursuing self-study? Are you pursuing some kind of formal training or credentialing? What are the steps you're taking to try and narrow that gap of the acknowledged weakness? That would just be the only item I would add to what Alan mentioned.
Turn it into an opportunity. All right. We are a little over time. We want to thank everyone so much for coming today. And before we go, Andrew, do you have any last words?
Oh gosh, more than anything, just gratitude for the team and the opportunity. Come back to that bumper sticker. Never stop growing would be my little message for everybody. Keep pursuing those growth frontiers.
All right. Awesome. And then, Alan.
And the last three words I'll leave you all with: own your career.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.